Welcome back to another episode of Inside Multifamily Access Control. I'm joined here again with Colin. How you doing, Colin?
I'm well. Hello, everybody.
Hello. So again, we're sponsored by Salto. Really appreciate the partnership to be able to do this on a weekly basis and really daily basis. So again, we're going to have a conversation about how multifamily and access control intersect. And a topic that we thought we'd talk today is we're going to really focus a little bit on the past, the present, the future around keys, credentials, cards, fobs, and have just a bit of a conversation about it since it's a very topical, topic that doesn't seem to change in a lot of ways, but I think we do see some things coming, especially I think if we start talking about the future. So why don't we'll kick it off, Colin. Let's talk about the past real quick, right? So past would be, I mean, if we don't need to go all the way back to like a boulder in front of a cave, but somewhere before that or after that is the key. So that thing is still around. Why don't you give a little bit of color around the key and its sort of importance, if you would, or impact that it's had in the past?
Yeah, I mean, from an access control standpoint, I think you'd be hard pressed to say that the key wasn't maybe the most impactful creation ever for access control. But it's been the credential, right? I mean, if you think about it in our lexicon today, the key has been the credential for entry for as long as most people can remember, probably, right? And it's still super impactful today, which I think speaks to why this conversation needs to take place and why we're talking more and more about the evolution of the credential, in the key being duplicatable, hard to manage and understand where it is, who has it. I think about my house here. I'm not sure who all has keys to this, and I think I actually have a couple of the garage door keyway. I think might actually be different than the keyway on my front door now, since I've made a couple updates. So that evolution from a key being the credential to what we see today with a card, a fob, all of that. I think it's really important that we understand what does a key bring to the table, cost-wise, value-wise, security-wise, risk-wise. But then also, once you move outside of the key, there's some complexity that comes with the credential and making sure that everybody understands what's a fob, what's a card, how do you duplicate those? Are those duplicatable? What's secure on them? And then moving into the element of mobile, right? What's a mobile credential? What does that mean? And then I think we should also talk about today PIN, right? In theory, a PIN is a credential that's been around now for a little while, that has its own security risks and also convenience. So how do you kind of balance that risk and convenience and cost of a key against a PIN against the future developments here? So
Yeah. No, a lot to that, but it makes me also, and I like the PIN idea because I think this comes down to a lot of times use cases, but before we get into those use cases, there's also this sort of comfort, if you would. And it reminds me of my days when I first started in the business. I started in lighting controls, and the switch worked fine on the wall. So it's sort of like, why do I need wireless lighting controls? Why do I need radio frequency, master controls, the rest of the stuff? And it was really, I think, a handful of things came into play, but it was like the value creation of having the other, and really the cost differences weren't that much different. I mean, actually, I take that back. They are. It's like, you get like a 7-cent switch or a $50 dimmer. That's like that's real money in between there when you do it on scale, especially. So same thing on the key side, but I do think a lot of it comes down to the comfort of using it, and it works. Like you don't have to, in a lot of cases, don't have to worry. Like, I know if I put this thing inside the keyway and I turn it, if it's the right key, it will unlock, versus the comfort sometimes that people have, I think, around consistent experiences of using other credentials. And maybe also the fact that our industry historically, you build these things to last for 30 years, and it's like until they break, there's really no reason to do anything. And the overall cost of like rekeying, like I'm actually surprised. I learned recently, like what it costs to like master key rekeying on this stuff. It's like millions of dollars in some cases, and the risk associated to, like, there's a document paper that exists somewhere with that key configuration on it, that is what's really the line between, a fire happening and you having to rekey your entire building. It's just, I think it's time to sort of move beyond that. And I think a lot of people have, but man, we still sell a lot of keys.
Yeah, keys are still very, very prevalent. Um, and I do think some of it is uh, that comfort level you talked about, right? When you have the key, you have control of access to those doors that key works on, right? And I think early on in the evolution of uh, access control and things like that, and maybe it was more in the corporate world versus in multifamily, but this idea that you have a card, but somebody else controls the access on that card, right? And somebody else can take away your access on a card or on a credential. Um, I think early on adopters of access control, that was a real fear for the credential holders, right? And you took away my key, and now I'm not kind of the ultimate decision maker into whether I get in that door or not. And as soon as you go to the credential, now it's based on that platform or that software that is granting that, and somebody else is the one who's putting access onto your credential.
Yeah.
But I think we're at a stage now where that's so common and so normal that we need to start having, okay, what does the end user want? And yes, it may cost some money for a property owner or something to upgrade, but that rekey is extremely expensive, and the resident is so used to, they may not even have a key for their car anymore, right? So sometimes people aren't carrying key rings anymore. So how do we help move this further ahead and get rid of some of the risk that is truly associated with a key too?
So then let's transfer. So we'll go from the mainframes to now cloud. So if it's the same way, it's like holding on to my servers in a lot of cases. But so all right. So if we move from the key, now we move into sort of the present, which is the card and mobile. Let's talk a little bit about an in pin. So we'll throw pin, card, fob, and light mobile, right? Because that's still early. Still, I think that's more part of the future than the present. But what are your takes on the today side?
Uh, yeah, I mean the pin, right? I think is the easy one that uh, convenience is there, right? Certainly simplifies uh, getting in and out of places, but adds a whole another level of I would even argue it's less secure than a key, right? Um, the ease to, hey Lee, if you want to get into my garage, my code is 1234, and now I really don't know who has that. But on the flip side, well, it may be less secure. The cost to change is significantly diminished, right? I don't have to rekey everything to change a pin, right? So if I've got an operational plan in place, I can change pins and cycle through pins and kind of maintain some level of control in that sense. But you lose a lot of control from the ability to share a pin, right? And then you get into, is the pin by user, is the pin by door? How do you kind of manage that keying process? Is an issue that comes up with pin. And then the locking mechanism also, right? With the old key, it was in the lock. Now, are you bringing in a door strike? Is it motorized? How are you actually going to get that pin to unlock the door? So there's a added level of complexity from function. And then as you move from pin into the credentials, you start to talk about 125 kilohertz versus 13.56 megahertz. If you go to the traditional 125 kilohertz, just radio frequency, you're starting to see now that those are a security risk. You go into malls today and you see the little kiosk where you drop your card in and it can get duplicated. So even today, the technology that is still prevalent out there, right? I mean, I think we'd be amiss to say that we've already moved from kind of the traditional prox card to mainstream smart card. Well, we're almost there. There's still a lot of prox cards out there that are a security risk. So even, we're talking about today with a technology that, frankly, I think is yesterday, but we're still mainstream because of perceived cost barriers, I would maybe say, or investment in hardware that isn't allowing us to move fast enough to a more secure credential. But we also are starting to see the migration to the smart cards, added encryption to them, more control and security over that. But it's probably slower than certainly I would like, being in the access control industry.
So on that, a couple things, I guess. The I think what you're explaining, which is extremely relevant, is that this is pretty. It's not straightforward, and it is complicated. So having some internal expertise. So if I'm a developer or property owner listening to this, I mean, I think one of the big key takeaways is, no pun intended, is the fact to have some expertise internally to help with this, or a really good partner that can walk you through it as you would see it. Because if you think about, so the pin, I believe gets a good amount of credit because of the ease, like you said, like people like that. And then the bridge to go from that to say mobile on that end, I don't always have my phone on me, right? So the ability to still get in, there needs to be that sort of multimodal, if you would, capability. So you starting to, this is where I think, we'll talk about future, but biometrics and things like that get into play that can help there as well. But there is a need to think of the, okay, what could go wrong here, right? So if I take away cards, pin, and I just go mobile, it's sort of like, okay, so then what do you do if I don't have my phone? Some people worry about if it dies, stuff like that, right? So you do have that still the problem, but it's still I think in use cases is where it's got to be used. Instead of our industry forever, I think, has been trying to create a lock or locks with certain modes that can be spread across all different types of verticals and all different types of use cases. And now the industry is starting to get far more complicated, to where you need to have the right product for the right place, just like in other places that exist. So it does make sense there. And then on the proc side, yeah, you're like, all right, cool. We've gone from keys, now we're moving into cards, but then, the 125 kilohertz side, which again, I think it has its place. It's overdone. I personally call it the cigarettes of our industry, because it gets overused inside of use cases of high security. And I don't understand, as an industry where we know those things can be duplicated as easy as they can, and we talk about securing places and people, but yet we lead with an insecure product. So it's sort of the dentist who just eats candy all day long, right? Like, it's like this idea that we need to progress a bit more in that area, and I think use it where it needs to be used, get serious about the smart card side, whatever it might be, and then start to apply that to what is needed, because then I think we're then truly being the practitioners of our industry and applying it in the proper place.
Yeah, I agree. And I think some of this conversation even needs to go back to our first episode where we talked about fail secure, right? And as an access control industry, that was success, right? And so we from as an access control practitioner, we're pretty quick to say, well, PIN is super unsecure. Maybe how do we avoid that? But in reality, we need to be saying, how do we make this as convenient and secure as possible, right? And like you were talking about the 125 kilohertz. Well, we have a solution that provides that same functionality in a more secure way. Why are we still here, right? With
Habits.
PIN, we don't have that flexibility, right? We're not at a point now where I can say, hey, let's put the pin on my phone, right? And now I just put my pin in, and we can cycle through pins, and we can get one-time password type of philosophies. We're getting there. I think that's that's something in the future we'll get to, but that's not there today. So to provide the pin convenience, we don't have a better solution. To provide the credential solution, we do have a better solution, yet we're still here in a lot of cases. And to me, that is a problem that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to come down to, I think, in a lot of cases of breaking habits that exist, right? There's specs that have been done and people have it, or existing systems that are there. So there's this belief that just order another 20 of those or whatever it might be, right? So breaking some of those habits. Now, so let's talk about, if we go from the cards, now we move into mobile on that side. So what is your take on where we're at today with mobile and then where we're going?
Uh, yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the big questions that we're trying to answer as a manufacturer and as an industry, right? Of um, because now the device becomes an interesting factor that wasn't there before. And now you're talking um, Apple is involved, Android is involved. It's no longer just an access control industry decision. It's a much bigger, more mainstream decision of BLE, Bluetooth versus NFC, and where are we going, right? So how do you build for the future to be dynamic in there, right? Um, as residents, I think multifamily is going to be one of the early adopters of mobile credentials. I think you're already starting to see a demand for it from a end user standpoint. I think commercial and businesses will be a little bit laggard as they try to understand, okay, employees having to use maybe a personal phone as a mobile credential, that may be a little bit laggard. But I think multifamily as an industry has an opportunity to really start to set the precedent for what do we demand from a mobile credential?
Yep.
How do we use the mobile credential? How do we control distribution of the mobile credential and all of that sort of stuff? Um, because it's a end user direct relationship, right? You can provide a card, or you may choose to use your mobile. And so, how do you make that an option, and how do you show that encryption? How do you deliver it? To me, multifamily has an opportunity to really help guide that based on what is the resident asking for.
Yep.
Um,
It's the consumerization aspect of our industry, right? Like, so historically, there's always been somewhat separation between consumer demands into the commercial world. And yeah, the nice sort of bridge, if you would, is multifamily, which has both of them, like you said. So it's going to force that conversation to have happen and the adoption, because they're going to say, I can order a car, food, do everything on this thing. I want to get into my house. So in my apartment. So make it happen. And yeah, I agree. I also think the other side is the overall maintenance and management of the facility being, mobile driven as well. That's going to drive it, because that sort of flexibility to send keys, delete keys. They don't have to go to the office to pick up a card. Like, all of those efficiencies that happen, and especially too if you have multi locations, so the ability, multi-tenant type places, to be able to go there. And then we talked about some of the use cases that are different, like on last time, about this, like co-living, co-working, the ability to have flexibility to go from one location to the next. And gets me excited, because I think this is the beginning of the degradation of credentialing importance, if you would, and moving in more to identity, and people bringing their identity to spaces versus it being given, where come to my office, I'll give you, or to the front, and I'll give you the card. It's like, nah, bring your device, tell me who you are, and then I know how to respond to it based off of the level of assurance that you give me, which is cool. The other side I would say is that gets me excited is we've not had to really worry about, when it was a card and a key and a fob and a pin code, we never really worried about the at-door experience other than making sure it worked. Now I have a relationship that has to deliver, if you would, on a much, much more consistent basis, and really taking that stakeholder that I didn't worry about before, because now they're directly interacting with it, and I can see it actually now. Like, I get feedback through the application of how it went and the rest. So I'm interested to see what the impact it is going to be there.
but I think that's what you just mentioned. The fact that I can get a response back is an understated value with the mobile, right? Because now I can deliver information at that point of contact, right? So there is certainly additional value that comes from having that increased complexity of that interaction at the door, right? I can now maybe give feedback as to why I didn't get in, directly, or you're past your time, or this door doesn't unlock until 7 o'clock at night or whatever, yes, on a unit, on a individual's resident unit, that may not be impactful, but think about all of the other common area doors and stuff where that may be
Yeah.
huge impactful.
Again, back to also use cases, like some areas you may want the pin code and the other ones you want to do it, but having the flexibility, I think, is the important part. And the mobile side is just going to, I think, just open up a whole new world of what the experience, and really this idea of generating access control as a feature of a much larger value proposition, and that experience on that side. And I'm interested too to see what functionality that has historically been inside the lock gets moved into the phone and things like that. Like, I think it's going to start to expand some of that. So let's talk a little bit about the future, what's coming. So, we could throw a handful of terms you want, like biometrics are coming. I think, I've heard conversations around integrating other technologies, like you see sometimes doorbells and, video cameras and all sorts of stuff on that case. I wonder too, everyone I feel like wants to go talk about the lock, but I think there's a door opportunity here that we don't talk about. Like, think about how the lock transforms if it's more embedded into the door, and we can like get closer to the Jetsons, if you would, of like the door just magically disappearing and opening if you go. I don't know. I mean, but how do you see the future? And I guess I'll ask you to do it in a couple ways, right? And I will too, but like the practical side of this. So not way out, but like, what do you think is coming? Let's say 2 to 3 years, and then what is the future of credentialing look like in the next 5-10 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is really where the conversation gets fun, right? I mean, a key is pretty boring. Yes, it changed to a pin and then a credential, but at the end of the day, that was all kind of just getting you into a door, right? Now we have some opportunities to do a lot of different things with technology. Biometrics is one, right? Whether it's fingerprints, maybe we don't want to touch anything in the future, so maybe it's facial recognition or what. I think in the shorter term, what you're going to start to see is really just more focus on that communication aspect. Where is BLE? Where is NFC? Some level of standards of just the mobile communication, right? What are we talking? How do you use a mobile on multiple devices, right? So like you said, I can use my mobile credential on this reader or that reader, type of a deal. Shorter term. Kind of midterm, I think you're going to start to see how do you start to leverage the identity, right? And dual authentication and securing that even further. So is it read my card plus a pin on my mobile credential? Is it an identity embedded on top of my mobile credential? So not only is it the secure element of the credential, but there's a physical aspect added to that identity security piece. And I also think that some of the other stuff that maybe isn't so identity focused, but use case focused, right? How do you become more efficient at, I don't have to take my phone out of my pocket, but I can get through that door, How do you do that with battery consumption? How do you save battery life on both the lock and the phone so you're not projecting all the time? How do you keep some of that noise down, but deliver a solution that I just walk through my building and it knows where I am and it's secure and all of that? Because you're starting to see location stuff and all of that sort of thing become a bigger and bigger place.
Yep. That's the IoT side of this, right? Where it starts to become like a true node, if you would, on the end, and sort of the like, and that's so for me, that I do think this whole idea of bringing your own identity that we talked about before, and the edge device being the lock, being able to make decisions based off of who you are and the level of multi-factor, also like time of day. So situational awareness of it really becoming far more dynamic, and the sort of ease and flow through spaces, whether they're commercial, residential, the rest, like that flow of it and understanding it's you. And so that, because if you think about it right now, every time you walk up to that door, it's like it defaults on the safety side that it's like it's the first time you've ever been there. Like there's no relationship that gets formed currently right now between, it's a very binary type relationship where I think it gets far more dynamic soon. where you walk up to it and it knows, and maybe even knows the, you know, the level of assurance it needs for this area, but then it's deeper as you go in, or, you know, depending on what the facility might be. Like I look at it as, if you, for those of you, if you ever have a post office box, right? It's always, it was interesting to me. So I went and got one the other day, and I feel like this is the same thing for like a multifamily space where you've got shared communal spaces that have to work with other people, and then you have dedicated spaces where you got to keep people out that shouldn't be in there, and the rest. And you know, they give you a pin, like you said, so now it's written on a piece of paper. I can hand it out to everybody, so it really does no good other than, you know, it's like whoever I can shout the loudest to is the level of protection that you have there. And then there's, you know, I have a pin, a key, two keys, and a pin to get into. And I wonder how many of those types of things exist within the where now I can just free flow based off of me. And then it actually, mobile is the person. So it could even be like I have a watch on, it could be embedded inside my glasses. It could be, I have a computer with me, you know, maybe I'm using biometrics on that case, because I do think the biometric side are going to start to. Also, I think the integration into videos and, you know, lighting products and the rest, to be able, like you're saying, the idea that there's sensors in that are all around, to be able to be like, hey, you know, Lutron system said it is him, and the, you know, the HVAC system is recognizing that, yeah, it's him, because they like to have the temp at 74. So when I go unlock, it's like, yeah, we've all agreed that this is the person. Like there's just some awesome side. I would also say the other thing that for the future of me is like attribute based access control is kind of neat. Like based off of my desires and things that I want. So when I walk into a facility like multifamily, again, it knows that, you know, I have access to this space, I have that. Maybe it knows that I have kids versus I don't. You know, maybe it knows and it can sense, you know, I've got more people with me than I normally do, so it does some things. But there's just a whole lot. Maybe it knows I like cookies versus brownies, I don't know, like it does a thing. But this whole idea of being able to bring stuff, to me, it's exciting, and we're getting there. The more smarts and the use cases that start to get developed to where on the multifamily side. But I think what we're hopefully communicating here is that it's far more complex than, you know, here's the lock and the keys that come with the lock, and then you hand them to people and you take them away from them. It really is a conversation that has to happen at a much deeper level within organizations in the multifamily side, as well as a level of, you know, appreciation or caring about it, because it really can add a ton of value, but it also can be a major pain if you don't do it that way, where, you know, if something happens, you have to call somebody to come out to fix it, which is, you know, still going to be there anyways. But the more I think you are exposed to it and understand it, the easier it gets.
Agreed. I mean, I think a lot of it is just about that awareness, right? There's certainly use cases for every one of those things that we just talked about, right? We just have to know and understand the complexity on one end and the security on the other end, and where do we fit on that spectrum, and how do we keep moving forward towards delivering the best experiences with the most secure solution.
Absolutely. So yeah, so hopefully we kicked off a good conversation just to start, you know, people germinating and think about credentialing keys, the past, the present, the future, where it can be. It's a start of a much deeper, longer conversation that I know you and I will be talking about for many years, and then it will be continuing to talk about even when we're not doing this anymore. So Colin, as always, appreciate the chance to have this conversation with you, and I look forward to doing it again next week.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.